Okay, so our second speaker is Richard Apps. Richard completed a rural science degree at UNE after commenced a career with Agribusiness Research Institute at the University of New England, working with the beef cattle, society management and genetic evaluation. Richard then moved to Central Queensland to establish the Northern Beef Seed Stock Project, Tropical Beef Technology Services, commonly known as TBTS. In 2002, Richard joined Meat and Livestock Australia and has had a number of positions through the on-farm and livestock productivity unit, and today comes with his cap on of being Program Manager for Genetics Implementation and Sheep R&D. Today, Richard's going to give us an idea of what is the strategic vision for the industry's investment into genetics R D&E over the next 5 years. Please make Richard welcome.
Thanks, Bruce. Good afternoon, everybody. It's nice to be back again at the Leading Breeder Forum and see plenty of faces that I've had the pleasure of interacting with over the last 10 or 12 years with MLA. I keep popping up at these things with a different hat on from time to time, but today my focus is going to just talk about the discussions that are taking place at the moment around how MLA and the people with whom MLA co-invest, DPIs, universities, CSIROs, etc., how we might look to restructure our investments around RD and E in the genetics and genomics field. And this is very much a work in progress. We have a couple of people working on this for us now, working towards a forum in the next couple of weeks to pull together potential collaborators. So the things you'll see here that I'll put up this afternoon are certainly not done deals. They're ideas, they're straw man models as such, but to give you an idea of the discussions that are taking place and where this may progress in the near future. It was 12 or 18 months ago now, MLA's on-farm research program had a significant external review, was referred to as a systems review, and there were a number of recommendations came out of that review, but one of them was that MLA should look at investing in larger long-term projects with strategic partners, and correspondingly, of course, have less investment in smaller, short-term, ad hoc type investments. And this was part of what has stimulated the discussion around the development of strategic partnerships or consortiums. And at our board's direction, the genetics area is the first cab off the rank, and we will see more of these unfold in other research areas in the near future. In terms of MLA's vision around genetics, there's some numbers there that sit in a strategic plan going out over a 10-year period when they are written out to 2022. But in simple terms, the vision is to double the rate of genetic gain. It's a pretty ambitious thing to do when there's already segments of this industry and certainly individuals within this industry making very high rates of genetic gain already. But the opportunity certainly exists there, and that's within the target of MLA's work profile. And some of the things that are going to drive that are going to be improved analytical methods, and we'll hear some more about that work this afternoon and tomorrow from the likes of Daniel and Andrew and Sam and so forth. We need to make sure that's balanced genetic gain and we don't get caught up in single trait selection, of course. We need to work on the extension and adoption area so that right across the spectrum there, breeders such as yourselves, technical advisors, your commercial clients and so forth are better skilled and better enabled to make use of the information that's out there. Again, there are people who are making very good use of that already, but there's a significant part of industry that could do a lot better than what they are doing now. They're missing opportunities there. And one of the things that has come up in the discussion around this area is the capacity to work more closely with breeders and how we might work with breeders to better collect some of the harder to measure traits that you don't normally do. And that may lead us down the route to programs, maybe harking back to things like the Merino Validation Project. I can see a couple of faces out there now who are involved in that, where MLA and others co-invest with breeders to collect new or harder to measure or non-typical traits that you wouldn't routinely collect within your businesses. So in terms of how we're going now, let's just focus, I guess, to keep it easy on the benefit-cost ratio, dollar spent for dollar returned. This comes out of a recent report done by a chap called Peter Amer and some associates of his, and if anyone wants the devil of the detail, it is a fully published report, and I'm happy to provide you with with the link to it or a copy of it. Well, you can see sheep's kicking along very well, 5.8. Southern beef is working well for us. Our Achilles heel at the moment is clearly in the northern beef industry, where we're basically just breaking even on the investment that's being made in genetics and genomics R&D in the northern industry. So a clear area of focus that MLA needs to work on to address that. But across the board, 4.5 BCR of 4.5 to 1. So quite a respectable return, and that in itself is part of the reason why MLA has been and continues to be a long-term investor in this field, because it does provide good returns to you as levy players. Part of what's also connected to the discussions around developing a strategic partnership around genetics and genomics investment is there are some changes that are taking place. I guess there's always changes taking place, but there's a couple of fairly significant ones taking place at the moment. And we'll hear more about these as the day goes on. And Graham Gardner will be joining us this afternoon to really dig into this area around objective carcass measurement. But there's a lot of work taking place here. It is a really dynamic field, and we are currently waiting. We have an application with the Department of Agriculture, Forestries and Fisheries, I think is the right name, for DAF, as part of their Rural R&D for Profit grant program to make a significant investment in this area above what we're doing now. But things that are happening out there, investigating the capacity to get objective measures in plants at line speed. And that's not in any way a trivial thing when you think that the big processing plants now are running up to 11 animals per minute. So it's a very fast-moving chain to be able to collect this sort of data. But the areas where there's work being done around electrical impedance, and I'm sure you've seen some of this at various other conferences or those who are at LAMEX, around hyperspectral cameras which can take images with the potential to differentiate different tissue types and tell us what's in that in terms of fat and bone and muscle, potentially intramuscular fat, potentially colour, which we may be able to relate to things like pH and so forth. The dual energy X-ray systems that are being trialled now, driving robotic cutters, and some of you would have seen, at least seen footage of the LEAP system that is now running through a DEXA in your local plant here in Bordertown. And I expect to see several more of those units around the country in major plants over the next 12 to 18 months. RGB cameras, these are pretty simple. These are Xbox cameras, PlayStation cameras. Might sound low tech, but quite a lot of potential in terms of being able to vision live and dead animals. Some really nice work being done in the beef industry about using this to condition score live animals by walking them past one of these cameras. But looking at a carcass level, again, to be able to scan carcasses, rebuild image of those carcasses, estimate carcass attributes, distribution of muscle, fat and so forth. The single-step analysis and the whole change in the ongoing changes in the analytical processes that are taking place are constant, and certainly the genomics work has brought a lot of challenges for the AGBU team and the technical committee, but again there'll be a lot of continuous change going on there. And with all these types of things we generate more and more data, and Sam will talk to you a little later about his work in our data insights team, about how we as industry manage a whole bunch of currently essentially disconnected data sets that are out there, all doing their own thing, doing their own things quite well in most cases. It's no criticism of those systems as they stand, but the capacity to pull that information together to value add it across industry. So in terms of the key outcomes we're looking for by trying to bring together a new model to invest in genetics R D&E, first and foremost is that top line. It's really about increased genetic gain and adoption by industry. That's where industry gets value from having its levies invested. If we don't get genetic gain and we don't get adoption, then there's little value in doing so. But fortunately, as I showed before, the sheep industry is doing very well in that area currently. That latest estimate at a benefit cost of 5.8 to 1. So doing a good job there, but always capacity to do it better. The capacity to make sure we get genetic developments and innovations delivered to industry as quickly as possible. And that's always a real challenge, that pipeline from bringing it out of a research program, putting into a commercially applicable framework, and then delivering it to industry. And it's a challenge we need to always be on top of and try to do better and better. because those delays simply mean less opportunity or delayed opportunities for you as ram breeders to be able to do that. And in this case, where we're talking this genetics and genetics consortium, we're also talking about the cattle industry as well. So while we're a sheep audience today, this applies very much equally to the beef industry in terms of bringing this together into a more coordinated and aligned process across species. Opportunities for data engagement, data acquisition. Again, how we handle the increasing volumes of data that are out there, new traits. Should some of these online measures come and play in the processes that are being worked on? Things like a DEXA unit. Should that come to fruition, it's got the potential to give you a reasonably good estimate of lean meat yield of every animal that goes past that machine in a plant. Could very significantly change the amount of data we have available to estimate carcass traits, carcass value and so forth. So while some of these things are not necessarily here and now at the moment, in terms of redesigning how we manage this aspect for industry, we need to be thinking 5 and 10 years out, because whether it'll be these particular ones we're working on now, whether it's something that comes along beyond these, some of these things will come to fruition and we will get access to more information. We've got the challenge of continuing to establish, manage and particularly fund resource flocks and herds. Now we're fortunate in the sheep industry, we've got a resource flock committed out to 2019. We've got that in parallel with the sheep CRC, so while the sheep CRC doesn't fund the resource flock, it overlays a lot of work on that resource flock and generates a lot of additional value on that. The beef industry is different. It doesn't have a resource herd funded in that sense, and there are several smaller resource populations that are directly linked to individual breed societies. So again, the challenge of how we manage those different models over time and the balance between private investment from breeders versus public investment through levies and other government funds through the likes of MLA, AWI and so forth. So some of the things that are in consideration at the moment that's helping to form this thinking and drive this is, from the beef industry perspective, we've had 21 years of a beef CRC. There are senior researchers out there who have essentially, until the last 2 years, never actually worked in an environment without a beef CRC. That played a really important and significant coordination role across all those players in beef R&D over that 21-year period. So it's been a great legacy for beef, but there's now, to some degree, a bit of a black hole in terms of re-establishing that coordination and how that comes together. And obviously from our perspective here today from the sheep industry, we're fortunate we got the 5-year extension for the sheep CRC, which takes us through to 2019. So we do have that coordinated across-party process there for a lot of research that sits under the sheep CRC banner. But now is the time we need to actually start building the structures and be prepared to roll on functionally and efficiently out the end of the CRC. I certainly don't know this, and I wouldn't want to put a hoodoo on anything, but the probability of another CRC after 3 of them, it's reasonably slim. So we need to be prepared that even if a CRC program still exists nationally, the probability of sheep for another round would be on the low side, given the repeated investments we've been able to attract. We need to look at essentially the declining R&D investment. And in that sense, there's a couple of things that are in play. One, the cost of doing business, the cost of running research gets higher. Just as the cost of things in your local supermarket and the cost of inputs onto your farms goes up, so do the input costs of doing research. Additionally, the amount of co-investment and collaborative input has gone down. We have less in-kind, we have less resources, less cash that comes in from other parties, like DPIs, universities and so forth, which have historically had some quite good resources over the years, but are much less now. So we essentially got less on that side of the ledger, and the costs are going up. And in terms of levies, at least from MLA's perspective, I mean, in the sheep industry, the levies are reasonably stable. In the beef industry, they're actually going down at the moment because we've had some significant reduction of the national herd due to prolonged bad seasons, particularly in the north. So, our beef levies are actually lower than they have been in historic years. So that's the reality of the R&D environment we work in at the moment. So we really do need to sit back, take stock of where we're at, work with our co-investment partners as how we might be able to redesign, rejig the way we do business to address some of these things, just as each of you have had to address these sorts of things in your own businesses, which face cost price squeezes over time. As Amy's mentioned before, there's also some other things that are aligning at the moment that make it timely to be having these discussions. One is the funding cycles, so the longer term contracts that we have in particular around funding AGBU, the Animal Genetics and Breeding Unit, which are a core piece of infrastructure out there underpinning genetic evaluation for both beef and sheep producers and a number of other industries as well. We've got the Sheep Genetics Business Plan or Management Agreement that Hamish mentioned is rolling into the end of its current cycle. And in beef, we've got the AGBU situation, we've got the adoption projects, the Southern Beef Technology and Tropical Beef Technology Services projects are all linked into this same funding cycle. So again, the suite of R&D&E contracts that exist out there at the moment are all basically coming to an end at the same time. So, and that's not to suggest that something similar is not going to continue, that it's the end of the life for those things, but it's very timely to be able to look at them in the whole as to how we might restructure and take them forward over the next part of the cycle. And there's also emerging opportunities internationally. Some of you may be aware that the restructures in New Zealand. There's now a group over there called Beef and Lamb Genetics New Zealand. Sam and I had the pleasure of meeting with a couple of them last week in Sydney just to start to further that relationship. But the New Zealanders have aggregated a number of entities. Some of you are familiar with SIL, Sheep Improvement Limited, is now merged into this. Ovita, which was an R&D group, is now merged into this. So the Kiwis have gone through this structure and they are genuinely interested in looking at further international collaboration. Further afield, in the dairy industry, there's a well-established collaboration under the banner of Interbull, and the Europeans are now actively developing Interbeef and looking at international partners that they may collaborate with in terms of beef genetics R&D. Opportunities that we need to explore to capture value for Australian producers. In the adoption side of things, we've got a lot of similarities across species. And we've just lined them up here, and this is certainly not a definitive list of things that are there, but in terms of the research front, we've got AGBU across beef and sheep. We have the Sheep CRC, and we've got a range of other projects that look at particular research topics. The implementation, putting those R&D outcomes into the delivery models, happens through AGBU into Breed Plan, Lamb Plan, Merino Select. You'll all be familiar with that process. We've got adoption activities that differ a little bit. In the beef industry, we've got breed societies, some of which play a very proactive role in delivering genetic information to their client base. We don't have that in the sheep industry. We've got more active service providers in the sheep industry than we see in the beef industry. So there's a mix and match of how industry has developed these things over time. And of course, there's a whole range of adoption activities, whether they're MLA-driven, sheep CRC-driven, or even activities, again, driven by other entities. That's not meant to be a definitive list. So again, opportunities there we need to be looking at as to how we align those things better. There's actually quite a lot of overlap in those things, and some messages around how to use genetics and genomics efficiently and effectively in a sheep breeding operation are in principle not different to using it in a beef operation. Sure, some of the traits are different, but the way we think about these things, the way we use them in practical and applied breeding programs really isn't different. So again, opportunities to how we might bring those together and get better coordination across those areas, and how we can also use that to better develop and coordinate professional skills, third-party support mechanisms out there in industry, better service providers. And I'm sure there are service providers now who are going on to sheep operations, working with people from a sheep perspective, while those businesses also have cattle seed stock or commercial cattle, and vice versa. So capacity to broaden the skill sets of those people out there providing support to industry, be it at the seed stock or the commercial sector. So it's really about trying to get those synergies, trying to avoid duplication. Some of the communication materials, for instance, again, we create them in beef, we create them in sheep. There's a few words that are different, but the intent of those communications are in many cases exactly parallel. How to record good data, how to get good management groups, how to use genomics effectively, what do the indexes mean and how do you use them. All that type of information has a lot of similarities. So capacities to streamline how we do that instead of creating them all from scratch from species-specific purposes, albeit there will still always be need for species-specific information and species-specific activity and delivery. So it's not necessarily becomes completely homogenised, but it's really looking for those opportunities where we can bring together efficiencies. And this won't be without challenges. Some people will say it's too hard. It'll disrupt some people's current business models. So they will create challenges, those things, but they're opportunities we need to explore now, and we're going to very actively explore these over the next 6 months as we unfold the discussions with interested parties around joining a consortium. So what might this look like? I'm not saying this is a done deal. This is not the final diagram. It's a straw man model, and I say it's very actively in consultation now. And there are a couple of independent parties who, if you'd like to speak with them directly, would be more than happy to speak with any of you about your ideas about how this might come together. But it's about how we best manage those targeted R&D projects and the core development, the core work around coding up breed plan, land plan, merino select models, developing parameter sets and so forth that are fundamental to the day-to-day business. Building those into better integration around how we deliver those services. You know, we're fortunate in the sheep industry, we get an analysis for each group coming out every fortnight. In the beef industry, depending on what breed you're in, you might get an analysis once a month. In some cases, you get it once a year. You get one shot at a group breed plan analysis. So opportunities to really improve the efficiency of how the things are delivered across species. How we receive and bring information into those systems, again, open for discussion. We've got key players in the beef industry like the Agricultural Business Research Institute. We've got breed societies, primarily in the beef industry, that are very active in this role. We've always got service providers who play very important roles in helping clients get data sorted and in clean and tidy, sometimes right to submitting and receiving back their reports and filtering that back to them. Then, of course, there's the direct access option that many breeders wish to take and continue taking. And we've got to look at how we continue to get the best suite of phenotypes, particularly phenotypes around calibration for genomic estimates into the future, around resource populations, and opportunities to really look at can we do a lot better about getting information out of commercial systems. And again, that links back to the measurement technologies that are developing now. If some of those come to fruition, then we may have the capacity to much more easily collect a whole bunch of information out of commercial stock that could come into the system, particularly around carcass and eating quality, around the carcass and eating quality areas. How we link that into systems that are out there now, such as Meat Standards Australia and the suite of information that gets collected there. A pilot project, just mentioned on the side there, LDL or Livestock Data Link, is a pilot program for processors to use as a feedback platform to send information back to their clients, and we'll see one of the processors launching that their application of it in the middle of May. And then, of course, other commercial services such as the genotyping services. And sitting alongside of that, of course, there needs to be the appropriate industry governance and accountability. I missed who was smiling there. Who's shouting the bar tonight? Steve Milne, is that you? No? No? He's looking down and looking guilty. Oh, it was Wally, was it? Oh, Wally. Jeez. Well, make sure, if you don't know Wally Jenkins, make sure you catch up with him later on this evening, okay? So to bring it to a close, thanks Mr Chairman, what we're really doing is scoping what the structure might be around how we invest in genetics and genomics R&D on an ongoing basis, who those parties are, certainly external to MLA, who maybe wish to be involved in this, and how, be it cash, be it in kind, be it physical resources such as animals on research stations or whatever it may be, and how private industry may engage in that. Of course, going back to the simple high-level outcome, it's about increased genetic gain and adoption to underpin profitability in beef and sheep value chains. Some principles that we've got on the table in this discussion at the moment. We want to be recognised as having the world's best genetics R D&E system. No stepping back from that one. We want to be able to, in an unrestricted manner, coordinate and get that R&D out to you as producers as quickly and as effectively as possible. We need to reduce those timelines and obviously be very conscious of what it costs to deliver those services. Look at options to create new ways to deliver information. There's a lot of stuff happening around smartphones and electronic media and those sorts of things, and while that doesn't excite some people in the industry, there's certainly, There's plenty of young faces in this audience who I'm sure are regular users of all that sort of emerging electronic communication and information access services. And of course, from industry perspective, because we'll be using your levies, government funds, industry money with collaborators, then there obviously needs to be operational transparency and accountability through appropriate industry governance structures for oversight. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Obviously, looking out through the crowd here, I can see a number of people who have actually been with lamb plant and sheep genetics from day one, and you thought you've had a little bit of a busy ride up until now, but with those guiding principles that Richard put up on the board there, there's some exciting times ahead. We almost haven't seen anything yet, so the challenge is there. Yep, the floor's open to some questions. Yep, down the back here.
Yeah, Lockie Day. Richard, just wondering, one of your first slides, you showed them $1 million of genetic gain that have been made. Have those figures been sourced from scientists or from industry?
It's a combination of all the above in that sense, Lockie. It's looking at what's been spent in terms of R&D and what genetic change has happened, what proportion of industry, and modelling the benefit costs from there. So we need to acknowledge that in any benefit cost modelling there are a range of assumptions made, but that work has been done by a group that were contracted independent to MLA, so it wasn't done by us, and it wasn't done by anybody who's directly involved in either the sheep or beef genetic evaluation processes in Australia. So in that sense, independent geneticists and economists came in and did that work for us.
Thank you, Richard. We might take the one up on the board. Do you see this consortium being just for sheep meat, or is there a possibility for wool to be included?
Thanks for that question, Jared. And I think I left you a message on your phone this morning too, so hopefully I'll catch you later in the day, just to digress slightly. But the answer to that question is clearly yes. There's none of this is what's been discussed here today is focused specifically on sheep meat, nor on beef. It's basically, from MLA's perspective, across our investments in both beef and sheep, and the consortium will be open to other players who wish to invest from a wool-specific perspective. So, MLA itself is not an investor in the wool research process, albeit we invest significantly in merinos more broadly, given merinos underpin the prime lamb production. So, I guess the key message there is that in this discussion around forming a consortium, it will be open to any and all parties who see they have something to bring and wish to be involved.
Any other questions from the floor? Yep.
There's one from Don.
Don Pegler, Mount Gambier. Richard, in your what key outcomes are needed, you say that genetic innovations delivered to industry without delay, which I certainly support very strongly and have for a long time, and I don't know that it's been happening. What is going to be the process to make sure it starts to happen, or that it does happen?
So within this proposed consortium structure, Don, the final governance and management structure is obviously yet to be determined, but a key part of it is bringing together the suite of people who are investing in different areas, basically the same table, so we don't have disconnect from those who might be doing research to those who are actually doing delivery, I guess at the two ends of those spectrums. So that's the challenge to bridge, is how we shorten that timeline, and by having all those parties at the table in that process, as opposed to one party conducting or developing their component, then handing it off to a second party or to a third party, having them all in the tent from day one, I guess, to use that analogy if I can.
Excellent. Yep, Jeff.
Richard, in the text you put up there, there's no reference to stock agents at all. I believe they're probably the biggest handbrake we've got on accessing and delivering genetic improvement. Is there any way that the MLA can become involved with the stock agents business and try and lift their game?
Thanks, Jeff. Yes, stock agents weren't listed there specifically, but there were many others that weren't listed there specifically either. So by absence doesn't mean they're not potential parties at the end of this discussion. And over the years, there are a number of us, certainly several people in this room, myself included, who have put quite a bit of effort into various agencies or different key players amongst the seed stock people in those companies and what have you. So it's a hard nut to crack, Jeff. I mean, the door has always been open. We've worked closely with a number of them. It was only a couple of weeks ago I was here in Adelaide on another job and met with one of the key agencies about the services they're looking to develop around better supporting their client bases, going beyond, I guess, risk of understating it, the simple sales mentality, and looking at how they build sort of full service around that in their business. So the door's certainly open, and many of us have had put in quite a few hours with agents, and I won't say that we've moved a lot of them a long way, but it's certainly on the target.
Richard, if I can just add and pull it to a close there, I think as I move around through the industry, one of the exciting things I see in the livestock agency sector is the rapid transition to a younger generation set, who are actually quite interested and keen on figures. They know how to use their phone, the apps, all those sorts of things. Yes, Jeff, you've beaten the drum for a long time now. Just keep it beating a little bit longer. I reckon we're on the cusp of something pretty exciting with the agencies there. So, yep, if I can just pull it together and ask you to thank Richard for his contribution. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.